Hi, it's Rowie Kiwi, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm working on a color palette inspired by Velaris, the City of Starlight from the Acotar series. I just recently finished the audiobooks and I was feeling particularly inspired by the city. So here in the beginning of the video, I'm just bringing in my inspiration pictures for the color palette. If you've seen how I make color palettes, I will usually just color pick from pictures that I find inspiring. So these pictures I just thought reminded me of Velaris and the way it was described in the books, just with the colors and not necessarily like what's in the pictures themselves, just the color stories in them. So now that we've got what we're doing in today's video out of the way, I'm just gonna ramble a little bit about the books, I think, and my thoughts on them, because I did have a lot of thoughts. I wish I was making this a little bit sooner after I finished the series, but it's been probably a month now and I'm still thinking about them. So we're just gonna ramble on, okay? So I had initially bought A Court of Thorns and Roses in a paperback book form, but I have a 1.5-year-old son and I have started working a part-time job again, so I was finding it hard to find time to actually sit down and read it because I have so many other things I need to be doing other than, spending time reading a book, and the only time I can really read is at night. So I bit the bullet and decided to subscribe to Audible, which I had never really listened to audiobooks before, so that was a new experience for me. So I downloaded Audible and I was just in time for the sale that they were having, and the first 3 books for A Court of Thorns and Roses were free with the Audible subscription for the dramatized versions by Graphic Audio, which I don't know if you guys have ever listened to a dramatized audiobook, but they are so good. They have different voice actors for all of the characters in the book, and it really makes it feel so real and like you're listening to a movie, and it's got dramatic music and all this stuff. It was so good. I really, really recommend listening to the graphic audio versions of the audiobooks because they were literally the most amazing things I've ever heard or listened to in my entire life. I just cannot tell you how good I thought they were. Okay, I'll stop gushing about how good I thought the dramatized audiobook was and how well it was produced and get on to talking more about the books themselves. And I am conflicted. I think the first 3 books I thought were really well done, and I feel controversially that it definitely would have been better if it stayed the trilogy with just the first 3 books and ending the story there, because the novella that they released and the last book were just, I don't know. I feel like they are so tonally different than the first 3 books that it's kind of shocking almost. Okay, so we'll come back to that. Book 1, A Court of Thorns and Roses. I really enjoyed it. I thought that it was a fun story, maybe a little slow to start. The last half of the book where they were under the mountain, definitely my favorite part. As someone who really enjoys fantasy books and not necessarily romance books, the part where things were actually happening, that's the part that I like. I enjoy getting to know the characters in the first book, even though in later books we kind of trashed them pretty hard. But I did enjoy getting to know them. I am definitely in the camp that it was weird that Feyre actually fell for Tamlin. I would have probably assumed that she would have leaned more into Lucian in the first book. I get it, but not really, because I felt like Lucian and Feyre had some good banter. It just felt like that might have been where we were going. I know the plot called for Feyre and Tamlin to get together, but he was just so rude and cold and distant to her the whole book. It just didn't make a lot of sense to me. I also feel like it was a good way to introduce Rhysand in the you know, in the book with Under the Mountain and stuff. I feel like the way he was portrayed and like so mysterious and stuff really worked, especially leading into the second book, A Court of Mist and Fury. So like I said, second half of A Court of Thorn and Roses is like way better than the beginning half, where it's just like Lucian, Tamlin, and Feyre playing pretend family and trying to fall in love. Like, things are actually happening. The characters get more interesting and a little more three-dimensional. We get Rhysand, who's cool and mysterious, and like, oh my god, he's so hot, you know? So then we get to A Court of Mist and Fury, where Feyre is not really happy with Tamlin, which, like, big shocker. I was definitely not shocked by this, because I felt like they weren't compatible in the first book. But holy crap, they're gonna get married. And then, ooh, Rhysand saves his day. I really miss, like, in the later books, how Rhysand is in this book. Like, in this book specifically, I really like how Rhysand is portrayed. He kind of loses a little bit of his edge later on. Kind of gets a little soft, which, like, okay, he's in love and found his mate, but I hate it when they do that in books, where the guy finds a love interest and suddenly is like a soft boy. Also, I do understand that he's putting on a little bit of a front to begin with anyway. He's supposed to be the most powerful High Lord in all the lands, and he's also supposed to be the enemy of like a lot of the courts, and like he can't uphold this image if he isn't acting a certain way. Like, I get it. I don't know. I feel like there's a little bit of a missed opportunity somewhere in here with his character. And with all that said, like, I still love Rhysand. Like, I still love how he is in the books. I just felt like he changed a lot, especially like in the last book. It's just different. So the second book is really about setting up the overarching plot line, you know, like leading up to the third book with the whole war situation. And it's really building on Feyre and Rhysand's relationship, as well as her relationship with the other people in his court. And again, I will give it to Sarah J. Maas. Like, she definitely knows how to end a book. The end of this book is insane. It is definitely very good, and it really just made me so like excited to see what happened in the third book. But yeah, so everything that happens at the end of A Court of Mist and Fury was just like top tier. Very good at leading into A Court of Wings and Ruin and preparing you for just like all of that craziness. Okay, so getting into A Court of Wings and Ruin, this is definitely by far my favorite book out of the first three, and really out of the whole series. Feyre is forced to return to the Spring Court as a bit of a spy, and she really just like fucks stuff up. Like, I'm sorry, I just don't know how else to put it. Like, that is just what she does. She totally destroys Tamlin even further than he was and breaks down his entire court. And it just stays that way through the rest of the series. Like, it is just shambles. I really enjoyed just the pacing of this book. I felt like we weren't spending too much time on anything. Everything flowed very smoothly into the next thing. It was kind of like there was never a dull moment in this book, which was fantastic. I will say that I'm trying to be a little bit vague in this ramble, because I know not everybody has read this series. Sure, a lot of people have, but not everybody. And I did a really good job of not spoiling myself for these books before I read them, or listened to them, I should say. And I would like for other people to go into it with like as vague of knowledge as I had too, like if you intend on reading these books. Okay, back to like the story a little bit. I'm just gonna skip straight to the end of the book. I feel like the involvement of the Archeron sisters all together was really good. I like that they all kind of had their part to play, and at the very end, like with Rhysand, what happens with him, that was definitely a little bit predictable, but I still like got teary-eyed because of how the audiobook like plays this. The voice actor did such a good job of being just like absolutely fucking heartbroken that it made me cry. Like, if I read that on paper, I don't think I would have had the same, like, visceral reaction to it. Okay, moving on to A Court of Frost and Starlight. I enjoyed this book. I enjoyed like the little bit of like world building that we got from this book, and that we got to see more of Velaris, which is the inspiration for the color palette that I'm working on now. Like, that book itself is what this color palette is mostly based on. It is definitely like the Christmas filler episode from an anime, but in a novella. So I think you can probably skip this book if you don't want to read it. Yeah, probably. I know that we get to see like Nesta's downfall a lot in this book, but we still like come back to that in the last book, and there was nothing really added in this book in particular that isn't touched on later. So, do I think you should read it? Yeah, I think you should read it. I think it was cute and a good like break between all of the craziness of the last book and all of the craziness in the upcoming book. A Court of Silver Flames. I feel like this book is weird, mostly because it's from a third person point of view. We still get like Nesta's side and Cassian's side for the most part, which is different from the first 4 books. All of the other books were from first person, so like Feyre was the one telling us the story. In this last book, it's an outside source telling us what is going on, and I felt like it was a weird choice, but I still enjoyed it nevertheless. It was just jarring to go from first person to third person. In this book, we really see Nesta crawl up from the sewers and grow as a person. Nesta is really struggling to accept the fact that she is Fae now, and unwillingly at that. She did not ask for this the way that Feyre did. So she's really struggling to come to terms with her new life, and I don't blame her for that at all. I understand her resentment in not having a choice in the matter, but honestly, Nesta is super nasty to other people in this book. Like, she's very hard to like from the perspective of other characters, and even as a reader, she is just very difficult in this book. And it's because of all of the trauma she has gone through in the books and in her life before the books take place. A large part of this book is building Nesta and Cassian's relationship, and a lot of the book is literally just Cassian trying to beat the anger and resentment out of her. Like, it doesn't really work. I guess I'll also talk about how there's like a lot of spice in this book that I felt was maybe a little unnecessary. A lot of it's just like spice for the sake of spice, and I personally enjoy books that use spicy scenes a little more intentionally, which, like, I get it. Nesta was using drinking as a coping mechanism as well as sleeping around in the beginning of the book. And now she's kind of moving into using Cassian as a little bit of a coping mechanism, but he's definitely taking advantage of the situation a little bit, I feel like. So that's just my thoughts on that. I do really enjoy the friendship that Nesta gains with Gwen and Emery. I feel like that was good. I feel like we needed more of that probably in this book. Like, less Cassian banging Nesta and more Gwen and Emery growing closer with Nesta through their enjoyment of spicy books and stuff. Like, I wish we could have seen more of Gwen and Emery with Nesta and a little bit less of Nesta and Cassian, even though I do enjoy their relationship overall. I don't really like what they do with Feyre and Rhysand in this book. This book, Rhysand is literally insufferable, which I get a lot of people are saying is because it's how Nesta views him. I'm not really sure. I feel like a lot of stuff that happens with Rhysand in this book just feels kind of out of character and just like weird. Same with Feyre. She feels like a totally different person, which even from Nesta's point of view, they should still be like the same people, just tinted through her lenses, you know? I also will say that I struggled a little bit during the like whole delivery of their baby in this book. As somebody who had a little bit of a traumatic birth experience, it was just kind of hard to listen to. I also kind of skipped over discussing like them looking for the dread trove items and everything to do with like the mortal queens and stuff in this last book. Like, there is a lot more happening in A Court of Silver Flames than just like Nesta's interpersonal relationships with other characters. I just didn't really want to talk about that stuff, but I am excited to see what happens in the upcoming books, and I hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble for way too long about A Court of Thorns and Roses series. I really enjoyed the books overall. Like, they all have their issues, but they're really fun and easy read or listen, like I listen to them on audiobook. And like I said, I really recommend the graphic audio dramatized audiobooks. They are super, super good. If you've read the books and already know what happens, I still recommend that you listen to these audiobooks because they were that good. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you in my next video. Hopefully it won't take me half a year to come back and make another one. We'll probably talk about the Throne of Glass series next because I am currently on Tower of Dawn and I have thoughts on this series as well.